Stray voltage is not stray voltage. It's current doing what it's supposed to do. You see, our electrical distribution system in the United States is called the open delta. And that means we bring the electricity out, we have a neutral, and we ground everything. And that grounded, when you ground AC current, it turns into DC current, and it's going to go back to that substation. It's going to go back to the substation by the path of least resistance. Now, if you've got a farm that's sitting kind of on some high CEC soil, you know what that is? I'll have a soils lecture here later on. High CEC soil means you got a lot of organic matter and you got a lot of clay coylite to hold minerals. Blow sand is CEC of 4, peat bogs is a CEC of 50. Anyway, and this grounded electricity wants to follow organic matter. When you have a DC or a farm with current problems on it, when the frost goes in the fall and comes out in the spring, you can really see it. Most people that will have this voltage problem don't watch their cows enough to see that they've changed. And a lot of times when I get into a scenario where I'm evaluating this operation, I'll just say, George, come and sit down by me and watch your cows. Just watch your cows in this barn. Got 50 cows in this barn. Go turn your vacuum pump on. And all of a sudden you'll see cows that will be picking up their hind leg. These two here, one will pick their hind leg up and the other one, they'll do tail twitching, not tail switching after flies. There's a difference. They'll twitch their tail. And they didn't go up and hit a fly. This is January. There's no flies in South Dakota. And you can just see them. You can just watch them, you know. And so anyway, I kind of got backed into this out of necessity because I was a senior member of my fine band practice, and then pretty soon there was lawsuits. So you go, this guy's lost 40 cows, and his cell count went off the roof, and there were about 4 or 5 people in the state of Wisconsin, one over by Fond du Lac and one by Milwaukee. And then we had a guy right under my nose that became a really, really sharp. He was a dairy farmer that went out of business from DC current. I retired from practice after 35 years in the trenches, and I had started Dr. Paul's, which I grew, but Organic Valley hired me to answer questions and work with farmers. I'm spending a third of my time at Organic Valley chasing DC current around the United States. We have 1,500 dairy farmers now, and there's probably 100 of them right now that need me. Something has happened, something has changed. The average veterinarian doesn't want to be involved, has no knowledge of it. The power companies tell you there's no problem, doesn't hurt cattle. Wrong. They cannot admit that AC current turns into DC current, or they incur a liability immediately. So to the electrical world, DC current doesn't exist, and that's the way it is. You know, it's faulty wiring on your farm. They have a number of things they come up with, and they never check for DC current, they check for AC current. And so, anyway, this led me to put this PowerPoint together. So Organic Valley has put this together with me. This is my disclaimer. I don't want to condemn anyone, anything, or any system. This is just, I have a statement I want you to all take home. Personal observation is the most reliable source of truth. And today I'm going to talk about my personal observations of what I've seen and what I've deduced from this. And so this is not Organic Valley's opinion or anybody else's opinion. This is just me telling you what I have seen. Sources of current. Geopathic current. What is geopathic current? Geopathic current is earth currents. Our earth is a ball, and the inside of that ball, the inner 30%, is an iron nickel ball. It's like a meteorite. And it's nickel and iron. It's very heavy, and it's magnetized. What does magnetism mean? It means there's current flow in the middle of our earth, in the middle 30%. In the next 65% of our earth is molten magma. Now the molten magma slowly flows. You have the tectonic plates on the Pacific Rim and over Micronesia. These are floating plates, and that's where your volcano activity is, at the edge of these plates. And when you get that molten lava close to the surface, you have a volcano, okay? Now the upper 5%, now the way that molten lava rotates dictates our North Pole and South Pole. If our molten lava decides to go counterclockwise instead of clockwise, or whichever way it isn't going, it will reverse the North and South Pole. That will create a major problem for the dairy industry because all transformers in everybody's yard wants to talk to the magnetic North Pole. If you build a new installation, put your transformer on the north side of your buildings and keep it out in the road. Keep your transformer as far away from your buildings as you can. If it's directly on the south side of your new equipotential plane, you have built a problem from day one. It's just so obvious that we can't be doing this, but we do it because nobody knows. There are ley lines. When they put a transformer up, or when they put in a substation, they can use, meaning the power companies, do infrared photography, and they can tell you the pathway that current is going to take back to the substation. Each pole is grounded, and every pole has a different ohms resistance depending on what it's stuck into. If you've got a knob of fracking sand, like my farm that I bought, the upper 700 feet is fracking sand, and that's not going to conduct electricity. Every pole has a different ohms resistance. If you got a pole in a swampy, wet area, boy, that bugger is going to conduct electricity. And if it's rain, or if the frost is going in and out. If you got this sandy knob, so this current just doesn't go right down the highway to the poles. It might wander up the stream. Anytime you got a slough or a creek, that's a huge path of electrical conductivity to that substation. So it could be a very, very circuitous route. So there's grid energies. What is grid energies? That is what man has created by distributing his electrical distribution system around the countryside. Every pole is grounded, every substation, and I'll show you how they're built. Every substation is a battery to recoup this energy, DC current, that's coming back underground. This is called the open delta system. Now Europe brings their electricity out, you use it, and it comes back. The US decided we're going to take it out, have a neutral, and ground everything, and have it come back through the earth. Europe does not have these problems. I was in Holland, spent a week in Holland. Holland wants to become as pure in organics as we do, because they can use antibiotics. Holland and Europe can use antibiotics in triple the time withholding. They can use hormones. And so they consequently can't put anything on the world market. So I got asked by 50 farmers from Holland to come over and put a series of meetings on around Holland because they want to enter the world market. And China, Japan, and the US have set the bar up here. No hormones, no antibiotics, end of conversation. And they want to get here. And they've never been challenged, and so they still use antibiotics and hormones as a crutch. They think, how do we do it without it? And I said, guys, you can walk away from that and it'll be fine. So, and they feed mainly forage. So they're going to have an easy trip to get to it completely to organics. But you have ley lines, you have Hartmann lines. Oh, that's up here. But your grid energy is what we've created. This includes electric fencers. When you ground an electric fencer, it becomes part of the grid. When you ground anything, a generator, that ground that you're putting electricity into the soil is going to be part of the grid. Cosmic energies. Cosmic energies are negative energies that come from supernovas. The most studied supernova was at 1070, is called Crab Nebulae. The Chinese saw this and documented it. We are awaiting a supernova on Orion's belt astronomers are sitting on the edge of their chairs. The Hubble telescope and the Keck honeycomb one in Hawaii, they can see things in space we couldn't just a couple decades ago. They're waiting for this supernova on Orion, and they want to study these cosmic energies. They go right through our Earth. They have no idea if it does any harm, good or bad, we don't know, but they're going to be looking at it. Here's a big one. Here's a big one. If you've ever driven from Arcadia, Wisconsin to Aberdeen, South Dakota at night on Interstate 90, you will not believe how many towers there are. I mean, it is unbelievable. There's red blinking lights, there's white blinking lights, there's red blinking, and if you notice, they're always usually by an overpass, and there'll be 2, 3 together. You know why they're an overpass? Because that overpass has got big steel girders, and it's a super ground. Or it's concrete. You know how much re-rod's in a concrete highway? You ever seen them, all that green re-rod, and you think, what are they doing all that metal? I mean, there's more metal in there than concrete. Superconductor. And all these towers, they all have to be grounded. And they want to hook onto something that really grounds them. So it's kind of interesting to be going along, and here's County Highway Z. No intersections coming out, or exits or exits, but just Z. And either they're concrete, and those concrete beams are filled with re-rod, or they're plain metal beams. What a good place to ground anything out. So just watch that when you're going down the interstate. I came in last night, and I mean, it was like, there has to be 500 towers between Arcadia, Wisconsin and here. There has to be. And they're all putting electromagnetic field, which when it goes into an aluminum building or is picked up, the hoop buildings have a 23.5 degree arc, and they'll pick up this electromagnetic field and energize it. You can get stray voltage in a metal hoop building from called EMFs, electromagnetic fields. And we'll get into that more, but here's how you can measure them. You drive under a big power line. This is a Gauss meter. You stick this out the window and you drive under a big power line, and it'll go up to 100 Gauss. 2 to 3 Gauss is the most you want to work in. Every farm I go to, I take my Gauss meter. Yes, sir.
Is that like voltage meter, you mean?
Yeah, this measures the voltage only in the air. Then gas pipelines. I didn't know this. I had a problem on a dairy farm that had your major gas lines are still all cast iron. And they found that if they put a cathodic charge, a positive charge on a pipeline, it won't corrode. And so anytime you see a pipeline and they have yellow flags, signs to identify pipelines, and they like to run pipelines in the right-of-way of the power companies. They share the right-of-way because they put a meter up, and it's called a cathodic system, which you'll see, to energize your pipeline. Well, that's the source of current. And if you've got one of these, and there's pipelines all over. Now, when they get into the PVC type, when they get into the laterals, and they're smaller, and they're green or white, they don't conduct electricity because they don't corrode. But any of the major lines, from substation to substation where the gas goes, they're all cast, and they are all energized. Any questions? Her question is, do wind farms have an effect in the area? Unequivocally, yes. It changes the grid. And they always build a substation. I have a situation in Iowa. A little company put in 32 windmills. Here's the wind farm. 32 windmills. Here is a 61 kilovolt power line serving the farms along here. So here is the substation. Okay, so they came on this line that existed, and they put an arm up in a hanging. So they added onto this 61 kilovolt transmission line the farmers were using 85,000 more volts on top of it. And they grounded that, so these poles are double grounded. I've got a guy sitting here milking 40 cows. He's got 1,100 acres of corn ground, or land, black land, worth $8,000 to $10,000 an acre in Iowa. He married it. It's his in-laws' farm for years. He's got a real short driveway. He's got a transformer sitting right here. He built a nice little parlor here. He's got a lagoon here. Oh man, concrete, re-rotted lagoon. Lagoons generate a half a volt of electricity. And he's on the north side of the road. If you're going to buy a farm on the south side of the road. Get your poles north of you. They're going to talk to the magnetic. And that's the first thing I'll look at. When I go to do a stray voltage deal, I'll drive around that farm for about 4 miles to see what's out there. Is there a big factory down the road 2 miles? You know? Anyway, when they built these windmills, and they used this substation over here, and they ran an extra 85 kilovolts or 85,000 volts along here, his herd went south. This little transformer, it's a 50 kV transformer, and then he's got concrete and reroute all the way around there. And when you get into a stray current herd, you see the oddest things. Things you've never, ever seen in 30, 40 years of vet practice. You'll see, I have never seen this before. I had one where I had jerseys that were blowing the turbinates out of their nose. You know, the turbinates are your cartilaginous red filters in your nose. I saw this about 6 years ago. I mean, I'd been around for 40-some years, and this guy built a new setup. Equal potential plane, he put a bunch of jerseys in there, and they just crashed. And they thought, oh, it's the green cement. Oh, it's the cement is too rough. There's always 17 excuses. And I got called there, and he built a disaster. Nobody addressed DC current when they built it. Transformer was sitting right next to the milk house, south of it. Yeah. And lagoon was north of it. And his fencer was right next to it. And I just shook my head. And the turbinates would stick out. And they were red and raw and bleeding. And I had to look, and I told the guy, I said, I've never seen this. I've made 100,000 vet calls or more in my life, and I've never seen this. And they couldn't breathe, and then they get pneumonia. They stand there. I felt so sorry for the cows. And it's just the oddest things happen. It's things that are so bizarre.
If you've got those wind towers next to you, how far away do you have to be for them not to affect you?
There is a 1,500-foot electromagnetic field, 1,500 foot, set up by the fans. Okay? And then that goes into the ground. I would say you don't want to be within a third of a mile.
Okay.
Where that's been devastating is the hog industry in Iowa. These little hog buildings with 600 head of hogs, they're built on a concrete bathtub with re-rod for manure. They're blowing the methane out, so they got all these fans in the pit. And then they got to blow the ammonia off the bedding, or off the concrete, so they got 2 sets of fans. They're all built of metal. They got a metal roof. There are little antennas sitting there. And they put up windmills right next to these hog buildings. These hogs are living in an electrical Auschwitz, guys. And there's a plethora of hog viruses and diseases. The factory farming hogs, I wouldn't want to go there. They have got a multitude of problems. Disease problems, and these little bathtubs they put these pigs in are just sitting there sucking up electricity. They're a huge equal potential plane with low ohms resistance. To summarize my whole talk, I could say that the equal potential planes all have a lower resistance in the grid. That's the problem with DC current. And that's when I go look at a farm, I want to look at all the grounding. I have a little deal I send out that asks about 150 questions. Where's your well? Where's your tile draining field? Because that's wet. I want to know your fans. I want to know your silos. And I deal a lot with the Amish, Organic Valley. Nearly half of our farmers are plain folk without a lot of electrical conveniences. Some of the old order don't have any. I'll show you a picture of an old order Amish farm that had major stray voltage. But anyway, ley lines, you can douse for these. Valley almost created a problem. Are you aware of what they want to do with that? Organic Valley built a $18 million distribution that is all metal racking, and it's all computer driven, and it's for cold storage, for all their milk comes in and goes out of here in the Midwest. $18 million operation, patterned it after a plant in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Beautiful facility, beautiful facility. And then they got into they got gifted basically 2 windmills. Gunderson Clinic wanted to be green and jump on the bandwagon we're going to be good guys, so they stuck a lot of money. Western Wisconsin Technical College wanted to train people to do maintenance on windmills, and they do have a really good program. So they came to Organic Valley, who's very green, and said, you and Gunderson Clinic and us put up 2 windmills and generate all your own electricity. So there's this power plant at Cashton, Wisconsin, or this distribution center. Here's a substation. So they put a windmill here. Well, that's super. This is south. Here's a substation. Here's a windmill. That windmill is going to talk to the substation. Here's a gas power line going over here, or a gas line across the road. They go to put the second windmill. They're going to put it south of the distribution center. I saw that and I called George Seaman up and I said, George, you don't put that windmill there. He said, why? I said, you're going to trap, I said, that $18 million distribution center is going to cook. And you know what George said? Aha, I want to hear the rest of the story. I said, you call a meeting. You were there, weren't you, Rick? Mm-hmm. I wanted him there because he knew. And one of the board of directors had been through this. They were both there. We had a meeting. George, I brought in our electrical guru that we were working with. And boy, did those engineers get nervous. Did they get nervous? Organic Valley, George figured it out. Our CEO is a visionary. He started asking good questions. They went and bought 20 acres of land over here, put the second windmill over here, and they would have had a disaster, total disaster. $18 million disaster if they'd have put that there. I got a thank you from George on that one. Now, all the old pioneers, in 1868, the Dettloffs moved into Pleasant Valley, Grand Meadow, Minnesota, flat prairie, and they hand dug a well. You can bet that Carl Dettloff knew how to water a witch, that he wasn't going to dig down in that black prairie unless there was water underneath. All the old timers that came out of Europe, they all knew how to douse, all of them. It's a lost art. People think it's almost wizardry now. They think you're a kook when you douse. Dousing, folks, is fun. And it takes the right person. And women are good at it. I've probably trained 25, 30 women. Most of all your old churches built, the steeple is built on a ley line. The steeple is built on, if you're going to go and have current flow and get revived once every Sunday morning, why don't you sit on a ley line and get turned on? Huh? I don't know if that was their philosophy or not. This church is 2.5 miles from me. It's Fatherless Lutheran Church. And so I went over there one day, and you know what? There's a ley line going right through that church. I got my dowsing rods out, and you ask, may I, shall I douse today? And you ask for ley line, you ask for underground water. You ask for negative energies in this barn. When I go to a farm, I'll say, are there negative energies in this barn affecting the livestock? Yes or no? Yes. Show me them. And you walk. Chatfield, Minnesota. I walk. Boom. Boom. I scratch in the sidewalk, in the line. I turn around, I come back. Boom. Scratch. Boom. Scratch. I turn around and look, and here's a gutter grate, and here's a gutter grate. And I said, I don't remember the guy's name. I said, why are the gutter grates? I can't get cows to go in those stalls. He said, you can shock them, they won't go in those stalls. I put a gutter grate, and he said, when they go in those stalls, he said, they jump in there. And then they bang their legs up. He said, most of the cows they put in those stalls are gone in a year. You know why they don't want to go in those stalls? Because they can sense that. They don't want to stand in dirt. It's like, woo. I don't know who I'm talking to, but dowsing is fun. Here's a calf. This is an organic valley farm. The wife raises calves, and she is a good one. We're vaccinating calves, or pregnancy checking, or doing something, and she said, Dettloff, I got a calf that's gonna die. Oh, I said, how do you know that? She said, every calf I put in that hutch dies. And she said, I've tried everything. So I said, look at it again. I go over there. It rained the night before, and this calf is drinking wet, muddy urine. And she said, I can't get it to drink milk. She said, they starved to death. And then she said, I come out, and inside the hutch, she's got 2 rings where she's got 2 pails for calf starter and kelp and humates. And she said, that calf is crawled under there. And I got to get the hog panel off and go out and pull the calf backwards and get up. And she said, I don't know. I got my rods out, and I walked. And I got right to there, and that, boom. It was on underground water 60 feet down that was moving. And it sets, underground water will set up an electromagnetic field. I went down, see that bobcat? Her husband was there. I said, grab that bobcat and let's move this hutch. And I went down and I found this spot right here, clean. We moved the hutch down up there. I grabbed the calf with the twine string, and she grabbed the panel, and we moved it there. I said, see what happens. She called me 3 days later and she said, how much milk can a calf drink in a day? I said, what happened? She said, that calf will drink milk all day if I give it to it. This is the same calf. And it caught up. See the white line here and the white line here? That calf caught up. I didn't sell many drugs, I just moved the calf. Wow. She tried putting the hutch back in there about 3 years later. Calf wouldn't drink, it's still there. That water's still there.
I have a question. I guess it would be real seasonal then, groundwater tables and that? Spring and fall?
Yeah, I would say in the winter, that's probably not gonna be an issue.
Yeah.
On that particular one. Good thought. Okay, here's how our electricity happens. This is Alma, Wisconsin. They got 2 plants. They got an old coal plant that's burning the low sulfur now. And they're sitting right along the river. They generate 345,000 volts or 345 kVs. And it runs straight east, not too far from me. 7 miles east of our place is this huge substation at Blair, Wisconsin. Now, the substations take this mega energy and they keep breaking it down. You can't take and plug an electric shaver or a household appliance into 345,000 volts and you blow it up. So that's what they have transformers. And a transformer, the wires never touch. Transformers are an oil bath where you have a coil and another coil, and depending on the size of the coil, that's how many kVs that'll transmit. You have, if you look up at your transformers, I think you're at your farm, Rick, you had a 15 kV transformer when I first got to Rick's farm, and it was rusty, and it was way too small. And when they get rusty or show oil, they're hot, and that means your ground, your neutral is hot, and you have a problem. And so the transformers reduce it down. Now here is a new one. Here's a new one, substation, and this is feeding off this substation, and this goes to the farms. This goes to other smaller substations all over western and central Wisconsin. This is a biggie. Okay, we had a situation that here's Arcadia, right here. 9 miles away is Independence. Here's Whitehall, 6 miles east of Independence. Arcadia has Ashley Furniture, which now employs 4,000 people in a little town. Golden Plump, which has a processing plant. We use a lot of electricity in Arcadia. Up until about 15 years ago, this substation on the north side of Arcadia fed Independence, a town of about 1,200. They said, okay, Arcadia, you're really sucking up a lot of juice. We're going to feed Independence off the NSP line from Whitehall. And we're going to go on Highway Q. The line in Highway Q was not big enough. It was a 61,000 kilovolt line. In Independence, they probably needed 90,000 kilovolts. And so, what did they do? They put up capacitors, which I'll talk to you about. And a capacitor is an electron sink that ups the ability of that line to carry so many kilovolts. What happens at 3 o'clock in the morning when all the lights are off? The line's overloaded. So what does a capacitor do? It dumps electricity. I had 2 farms on this line. They put these 3 capacitors right up next to Waldera Brothers Farm. My biggest account of 425 cows, chasing 30,000 pounds of milk, and that herd went south so quick you couldn't believe it. I would do 75 pregnancy checks to 100 every Wednesday, and they had them in lockups. And I go there, and all of a sudden it's like sticking my arm up a cast iron well pipe, and I'm getting kicked, and the cows are wild. And every milk fever that comes in and has milk fever dies. I mean, it's just like, what happened to your farm? I called my guru and I said, hey, and I had an organic farm sitting next to it. He could not get his cows in the barn. His cows would brace themselves and they wouldn't go in the barn. He had to push them in with a bobcat. And his herd went south. They were half a mile apart. I called up my stray voltage guy and I said, I got 2 farms. He said, where are they? I said, by Independence, Whitehall. Oh, okay. He said, yeah, they're cooked, aren't they? And I said, what do you mean? Oh, he said, that big line. He said, you see those 3 big deals out in front of Waldera's? I said, yeah. I said, they're capacitors. He said, until they disappear, they're cooked. They can have the Public Service Commission, they can run all kinds of meters. He said that line's overloaded and they're just getting zapped, and 9 volts of electricity are coming into the freeze-stall. Just jolting those cows every night. So he comes to my garage. He said, I'll show you what's going to happen. He has a map that shows the infrared ground currents. And he said, well, they got to build a new substation. They're going to build it either on Albert Genther's farm, or they're going to build it over here by Square Bluff. I said, how do you know that? He said, because of the ground currents. All substations are built on ground currents. They're not going to put it on a sandy knob. They're going to put it on heavy clay. It's low. How'd they build this? I'm driving by 4 months later. I got clients all around here. Here the big old yellow trucks are out there and they're grading all this clay off. And they take re-rods, 24 foot long, 18 foot long, copper rods, and they had them sticking up like hair on a dog. And they drove these rods down into the ground. And then the next thing they did, they backed up with truckloads of rock salt. They got about 3 feet of rock salt. And then they cover it with clay and gravel. And you think they must be spraying Roundup on that so it doesn't grow. No, that's salted. They're building a battery to regroup the ground currents. Isn't that interesting? I mean, when it rains, it really sucks it back up when it's dry. So this is on Genther's. When they turned that on, Brony Manka and Waldera's problems were over. It's just amazing. That's our electrical distribution system. Doppler radar, Mayville, Wisconsin. We've got a couple dairy farmers. These are huge electromagnetic fields. This is Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We've got some people, we have Mennonites moving into Georgia. Land's pretty cheap in Georgia. I didn't realize that. In Georgia, here sits a Doppler. It's a military base. And we got a guy that bought land and he's building a dairy setup right next to that Doppler. This Doppler here is on a railroad track, on a gas line, and on an electrical. I mean, these really are grounded. If you're around a Doppler, that's a bad deal. Don't buy a farm around a Doppler. If around a Doppler, the cows really look weird. They have these big bulgy eyes. And the water always looks black. This is the Doppler effect. And I've seen this. The last time I saw it, I was looking for this. And these cows, they're so buggy-eyed. Why? I don't know. We can't answer everything. Just be aware of it. This is a Doppler farm in Mayville. No, this is down at Fort Campbell. That's our Kentucky group. And she's drowning herself out. This is a very poor picture. But she's in this parlor milking and she's got her nose pushed and she's drumming herself out. They'll do that quite often. Here's Arcadia, Wisconsin. I live 7 miles east of town up on a hill. And as Ashley Furniture grew and grew and grew and grew, I mean, they've got 43 acres on the roof producing furniture. This is the largest furniture manufacturer in the United States now. And so all of a sudden, we put a new highway in 2000, and they brought 7 miles of steel poles out of Arcadia. These are steel, expensive electrical poles. Why? That is the grounding system for the city of Arcadia. There's so much electrical usage in Arcadia, they thought somebody's going to get electrocuted on the neutral. So that is 7 miles of grounding of steel poles. It ends 100 yards over the hill from our new house. Wherever you see those, it's a city that's got a lot of electrical use. They're at Brillion, Wisconsin. They're at Marshfield, Wisconsin, with all the medical facilities. Here's overhead power lines. A rule of thumb. The taller the power line, the higher the kilovolts. And you can kind of study the towers. I've got a publication. This is going to be in my new book I'm working on. I'm going to lay out DC current. I don't care what the electrical cooperatives say or what they, I'll have a target on my back. I already have one there. But I'm old, so anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. But these are the 750 kilovolts. How far do you think the electromagnetic field comes out from these? And that's why they want them up higher, to shorten the electrical field here. About 2,500 feet. You will be in an electrical field. If they're the most common ones are the 345s, and they're 2,000 feet. And this is put out by the Public Service Commission in the state of Wisconsin in 1955. This bulletin put out, and boy, did that get squashed. Lyle Sell had one, I have one, and that's going to be in print. They'll usually run gas lines. They'll run gas lines with these because gas lines need to have, and not this big though, they are not going to put a transformer on these biggies here. New York. Came on our organic truck, struggled getting on because we have cell count requirements that are really stiff. We don't want to take milk that's over 350,000 somatic cell count. For those of you non-dairy people, that's the sloughing of dead cells or mastitic cells into milk. Milk was never controlled. And I started practice in 1967. We had a lot of people with still some 10-gallon milk groats and a lot of little creameries, and there was no somatic cell count. I can remember going in barns. I can remember as a kid in Minnesota, we milked 18 cows, and that last one had a little garget. And well, I think we can get this stuff through here if we just pound on that strainer. We don't want to waste a new strainer pad. So you would pour that in there and slowly and you pound on it, and you'd sell that to the creamery, and they made butter, sweet cream butter that went to Boston. We were so proud of our butter at Grand Meadow. Well, they came out and they said, we will not accept any milk with over 1 million somatic cell count as potable milk. And that was after I started practice. The million came in. Oh, the old guys complaining, you know. Well, then they lowered it to 750. When Organic Valley started, because they wanted value added, no hormones, no antibiotics, they said, let's not sell any milk over 400,000 cell count. Then my neighbors looked at me and thought, they're crazy. They're never going to get that. Well, you put a little carrot in front of them called money and they get it. And we've lowered it to 350. Organic Valley's somatic cell count average for all our herds is just a hair over 200, and it keeps going down every year. And so we got the cleanest milk in America. It helps shelf life. It helps taste. Okay? This herd struggled to get on our 350. Nice operation. Nice operation. They bounce up. They bounce down. They bounce up. They're on the WHIP program. They're off. I go and put on tour in New York, putting on meetings for a week, and our man on the ground says, we got to stop at this farm. He said, they can't raise calves. good operation. He said, I don't know why they can't raise calves. So we drive in. What do I see? 345 kilovolt power line right here. How far is this away? Sure, probably 1/10 of a mile. This has got a huge electromagnetic field enveloping this farm. You look at these silos, and you see electrolysis. This is in the March or so. It had rained, snowed. Look at how wet this ground is. Think that'll conduct electricity? You bet. I look over here, I said, who lives in the trailer? Our son and daughter-in-law. Oh, how long have they lived there? Oh, 6 years. I said, you got a lot of grandkids? No. He said, they can't, they're having trouble. They tried everything. Spent a lot of money, we haven't got any grandkids. I said, move. This is an electrical Auschwitz. This thing's got metal frame under it. This has got aluminum roof and sides. Ooh, I mean, that's just sucking up current. She's never gonna get pregnant in here. A year later, they had their first child. They moved out of it. They just, in desperation, they said, okay, we'll try it. Didn't take long. The smaller, the higher the tower, the higher the KV. This is just the next tower down, over here. Here's their hoop building. That's a 23.5 degree arc. 23.5 degree arc. This is electrolysis. This is aluminum. That's not rusting. That's just turning black from electrolysis. Here's where the calves were, in this hoop building. Concrete. Now, the first hoop buildings, if you notice on the hoop building, the first hoop buildings were put on wood. They would put in like 8x8 timbers, creosoted timbers, and then you bring the hoops to them and they would bolt them on the top. Now the new hoop buildings are metal and they go down 6 feet into the ground and they're hooked right to the foundation. And that foundation is concrete with re-rod. And then you got re-rod in here, and if you put a Ritchie water in here that's metal, or you ground a fencer. These hoop buildings can be terrible for stray current. They had a metal water in there. The calves had ringworm. It looked like they were all wormy. They had strawish hair. And they all were getting crypto and cocci at 4, 5, 6 days. They were dying from scours. If a calf goes through a terrible scours, 2 weeks later it's going to go through pneumonia. Rule of thumb. So we had to make some major changes on that hoop building. But they're married to that power line. Gas pipelines. This is on Highway 71 in eastern Colorado. We have a property in Cortez, Colorado, and we drive down this state highway. It's a shortcut, and there's these power lines, and these are small power lines. They're not big ones. But see here, see this yellow deal? That's a gas pipeline. Here's what they look like. Caution, gas pipeline, underground. And that's cast iron. And here's what's called a cathodic charge. Here it is on the pole. It's a special device, and they run it underground, and they charge that line. And the power company, the gas company, gets charged by the power company for juice to power that. You see these all through where you got gas lines and power lines, small ones running together. Here is another thing to stay away from. This is a gas shutoff. Right here, big gas shutoff. They have to have these. They have to have these every so often, in case some contractor hits the line and that, so they got to shut it off here and there. Current flow, this is going to be on the test, doesn't do 90-degree angles. Current flow will arc. And so you got this gas line buried under here, about this deep, and you put a 90-degree elbow and you go up. Right at this elbow, that current that's following here is going to go boom, 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 boom. Same way. Comes up, there's your shut off, goes down, you got another 90-degree angle, this one's going boom, 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 boom. This sits by Mondovi, Wisconsin, about 2/10 of a mile away. Over here, there's a clay knob, heavy clay, heavy CEC soil. On the south side of the farm, this guy built a new freestall setup for his young stock. Concrete, sand bedding, re-rod in the concrete. His cattle won't go in the building. They will not go in the building. The building's hot because this is spraying current into that building through that heavy clay. I missed this. I didn't see this or know this. I was up there, looked around, couldn't figure out. I knew it had to be a current issue. I looked for everything. I called my friend. He drove in. Took him about 2 minutes to figure that one out. I learned something. He said, they got that pipeline next to that gas shut off. He said, that's got a 90-degree angle. I didn't know they had electrical current on gas lines. Do you guys know that? They all do. Here's a cathodic system. And it says right on it, cathodic system, and there's a meter. They're charging the gas company. There's another one. Here's a pipeline going south of a calf barn. I'm standing with my back to next to a calf barn, but there's yellow flags over here, and they got an easement, and they run it right through here, you know. Well, that's putting electricity off, and guess what? It's going into this new calf facility. And it's got concrete re-rod, and it's got a metal water with electricity. And see this calf? He's got his nose pressed against that, and he's picking up this foot. That's very common when you get into a stall barn, that a cow will pick up 1 foot. She'll just stand there on 3 feet. And head pressing is very common. Into the stall, they don't want to stand there. I've seen cases where animals will slide way over and push the other cow way over to get out of her stall because there's current there. They can, and these calves, ringworm. You know why they got ringworm and they got dry hair going? Because they don't drink enough water. The water consumption, when you correct a stray voltage, and I don't want to call it stray voltage, a DC current problem, water consumption always goes up. And this is one way that the early people that were chasing DC current would detect it. They put a water meter on. How many gallons you cows drinking? These cows should drink 30 gallons of water a day and they're drinking 18. No wonder you don't have any milk. Here, 15 kV transformers. I think some of these are from South Dakota. Rusty. Too small. I do not want to see, rule of thumb, on a animal operation, if you have any amount of animals on an operation drinking water and that, you should have at least a 27.5 kV transformer on the pole. Now they put the new green boxes in. They don't hang transformers on poles anymore. That green box either has a number on it or it's embossed right into it. It'll be a 25 or a 35 or a 50. They're putting bigger transformers in all the time as electrical usage goes up. See, a lot of these things were created on these farms that have been homesteaded for 150 years because you kept adding buildings. And you kept adding another ground. And you kept adding more concrete. And so a lot of these farms have built themselves into a mess because they never considered this. I mean, they went and they planked a new building right in the wrong spot. You know, and so it's never been addressed. We tell anybody, if you're looking at buying a farm in Organic Valley and you want to move, first thing you do is you call somebody to look at that if you even want to own it. There are a certain number of farms that I've had worked with where when it's all said and done, the expert will say, move. Move. And it's really scary when you have children around. The cell is a cell, you know. We have 2 feet, cows have 4 feet. Enough said. Here's right next to the free stalls in the parlor, here sits the service entrance. That's grounded. Going in, look at all this stuff here. I mean, this is a hot area. Here, there's 15 kilovolt. I probably was in this 15 years before I saw my first 10 kV. I saw a 10 kV transformer on a dairy farm in Viola, Wisconsin, and they were having an issue. And I said, call the service company. Now, when you incur a problem, first thing you do is you call your cooperative, and you get more bees with honey than you do vinegar. We don't talk lawsuit in Organic Valley, or I don't want to be involved in that anymore. If you're going to talk lawsuit, don't call me. Just fix the problem. The only people that benefit from lawsuits are attorneys. I've seen it over and over and over. And so if you do have a problem, call the cooperative and say you'd like a service update. And I'll usually leave a list. We think our transformer should be bigger than this, and we'd like to move it. And when they know that you know, they get really cooperative. The cooperatives, the farmer-owned people cooperative, not the big independents who are in it for money, are very good to work with. It's been a 180. We've learned about this, and they know there's enough people out there that know this, that when you say, I think my transformer is too small because it's rusty, first thing they'll say is, who told you that? And when they know you know, they came out and changed your transformer within 48 hours, didn't they? I mean, they know that you knew. And so, and you work with them. Don't get belligerent, don't get ornery, don't talk lawsuit, just say, hey, let's fix the problem together. And I've had them where they've even put in poles to get them off the end of the line. One of the red flags is don't be at the end of the line. And there's another line over there, and I said, you can afford to put in 3 poles yourself to get off the end of the line, make it a circle. And so the cooperatives have gotten really good. And you see this, or I see this, and I tell them, call your cooperatives and tell them, you got a transformer that's hot and it's too small. And it's hard to get them to move it into the ditch, because they all say, well, you're going to have line loss. That's not true. The state of Maine, we have dairy farmers in Maine, all transformers in the state of Maine are in the ditch, no matter how long the driveway is. There's no line loss or dribbling loss. It means the guy at the end of the line wouldn't have any juice when they got there. And so get them to move it out of the yard as far as you can to as far as north you can get them, depending on how your farm lays. His question was, is if you're on the north side of the road and your line and transformers on the south side, get as far south as you can. Couple, 2, 3 poles in between.
Couple poles between your yard and the main line.
Yep. If you've got a short driveway, then get them to move the transformer to the east or to the west of your equal potential plane.
A quarter mile would be ideal.
Quarter mile would be enough. Here's a 10 kV. Here's a 10 kV. Here's a 10. That's little. That's little. I wouldn't even want to live in a house with a 10 kV. That means your neutral is probably going to be hot because it's going to be overloaded. Look where this one is sitting, right next to the barn. I had 2 farms in my practice. One was a 60 stall barn, and it was situated just like this. It was a bigger barn, and it was on the end of the barn. Well, no, the milk house would have been to the south. The pole was right here within 2 feet of the barn and in the barn. I could drive my Ford pickup with a computer up to that pole, and when I got done with my vet work on that farm, my clock was always at 12 o'clock and my radio would flip to an AM station. There was enough ground currents from that transformer going into my radio tires, which have metal in them, into my Ford pickup that it switched the computer around every time I drive up to these 2 farms. And that's going right into that barn. And interestingly enough, in the one, half their sick cows were in the first 5-6 stanchions, right inside the barn. But that's a no-no. That's a no-no. If you have that, call your cooperative and tell them, I want that thing out in the road here. Capacitors. Here we go. What's a capacitor? A capacitor is, it looks like a transformer, but it's got fins on it. And it's nearly always found in 3s. My property, or my big farm by Whitehall, it was just sitting down the road here, and here's a pole with a capacitor, here's a pole with a capacitor, here's a pole with a capacitor. And those 3 will dump electricity into this, right into the ground. And a lot of times they'll put 2 poles up, and what this means is that this line, if it's a 61 kilovolt, probably during peak usage, there's usually something or somebody moved in with a big motor. And they got to put them up. And they will dump electricity. That means that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a hot day, or a cold winter day, when everybody's running their air conditioners or their heaters or whatever, and everybody's busy in the factory, and that line needs 88,000 They're 88 kilovolts or 88,000 volts, and this is only for 61. These have jacked up the current flow there. At 3 in the morning, when everything's quiet, those are dumping. They're dumping. Very common. They're all over. We have a lot of lines that need to be upgraded. I see those all over. Here's 3 of them. You can see this building here. That's the end of this building. These 3 capacitors are causing this electrolysis on a roof like this. Now this isn't just getting old and rusty. This is electrolysis. That was a hot barn. There's 3 more capacitors. This is going through Wyoming, and this is probably going to 1 ranch. Very low usage, and so they've got 3 transformers here to lower the kilovolts to go into this 1 ranch. This is 2.5 miles from me. A couple of boys from Blair, entrepreneurial, decide to put in a little sawmill right here. I have a tree farm right below this. My first 148-acre farm is all walnut and pine trees. And this adjoins my land, and there's a lot of oak woods here. And we have a lot of hardwood woods. And these 3 guys from Blair, young guys, bought a big Power Miser saw. Stationary saw for sawing oak logs. It didn't take 2 weeks in this capacitor up here. This big motor, I don't know how many horsepower it was, but it drawed so much current that this is a line out in the middle of nowhere. There's no towns around, and this little line hasn't been updated probably since 1937, and it just needed more capacity because there's some houses going up. Kind of interesting, I was coming home one day and I looked over and thought, there's a capacitor. And I looked over and I thought, oh, that's why that's there. Here's a farm. I'm approaching it from the south. We have a big transmission line here going this way. Okay, then we have this line going this way. Then we have a substation here. Then we have a slurry store. Slurry stores, when you got a manure above ground, these will generate all your metal slurry systems, harvester or slurry store. They will generate 0.5 volt of electricity. And the fuller they are, the more electricity. You never want to have the top of this above the floor of your barn. So here he's got this substation right next, and that's only right here, and he's got this. And on the north side of his barn, he's got his 2 transformers here. This guy is trapped. This guy is trapped. That had to have been, that has no cows in it for 20 years. And I'm sure that he got taken out. You can just read it in the leaves. This barn was built at the same time. Young guy, came organic, good farmer. We got some wet time. Why do you think we have electrolysis on this part of the building and that part we don't? There's a pit under this part. Concrete slab lagoon pit full of manure, generating current, and it's going right into that roof. This facility's gone now. He's a grazer.